Hi guys, my name is Kat, and today I'm going to be your guide through the public catacombs we call the internet. Just like anyone else with a functioning heart and brain for the last week or so, I've been digging through the Epstein files. I want to share a particularly interesting topic that I have run into. That topic is cloning and gene editing. I don't mean cloning sheep like Dolly the sheep, but cloning people, because yeah, that's the kind of stuff this dude was into. So I do like to give credit where credit is due. I got tipped off onto this topic through an X account called the artist known as Jess. I am pointing at my monitor. Okay, so I need to point here. Right here, this guy. Yep.
Tunnels. They all gotta have tunnels. What if you think the worst shit was going on the island? Oh no, he was doing some Dr. Moreau shit out there at Zorro Ranch. Yeah, that big old ranch. There are emails between Jeffrey and a scientist. Of course, they got to redact him out because we got to protect this guy. They were going to be gene editing babies because it was too difficult for them to go around and find the right looking girls because Jeffrey, no brownies for Jeffrey. Jeffrey was not into fucking, it had to be white, and he really liked the Russians. So they were just going to genetically modify fucking humans. And then if they got the right one, they were going to start cloning them. And in these emails, the scientist is telling Jeffrey, yeah, 5 years, we could have a human cloned. We could be rocking this out all right there in your laboratory. He said the scientist told him he was doing garage work engineering, garage gene modification.
I like to verify and confirm things for myself, so naturally I headed to the DOJ's website, to the Epstein files. Nope, right here, right. Alright, I'm gonna get better at this, I promise, guys. Right. It's right there, it's on the screen. Alright, so I am gonna just quickly talk about how I found the file for funsies. Maybe it'll help someone in the future. First thing that comes to mind, we're talking about gene editing and cloning, right? And the word garage really stood out to me, like garage science. I looked up the word garage science, I didn't really find anything. So next I looked up genes, and wow, I don't feel like going through 1,600 files. Yeah, your girl over here ain't got time like that. So next I tried clone. Alright, 203, 10 per page, 20 pages. I am a persistent bitch, if nothing else. I can stomach that. So, I'm not gonna put you through all of it. I didn't go through and through all these pages until I found the right one. Okay, we're done with the typing for now, so I can put this back up here and hopefully it's a bit more clear. The file we're looking for ended up being on page 11, if I recall correctly. I was going through page by page. Maybe it was page 10, 12. Yes, 12. My bad, 12. The file we're looking for is on page 12. And as I was kind of reading through and clicking through files to see what's going on, the word garage biology stood out to me. Remember what Jess was saying? I actually don't know if his name is Jess, but we're going to call him Jess for now. Garage, right? Garage science is how he recalled it. Garage biology is how it's mentioned. So I opened this file and let's see what we found. And I know Jess mentioned the name of the person, that the scientist that was helping Jeff with his cloning project was redacted. I mean, his emails are redacted. One thing I've noticed is the redactions in these files is not very good, unless it's somebody important, and they were very thorough about the redactions. But in other files, I've found that the name and the email would be fully redacted. There's multiple copies of almost all the files, so if you find different copies, you might actually get a portion where only the email is redacted, but the full name is available. So it seems we're looking for a Brian Bishop. Alright, let's see what Brian has to say. Looks like this conversation took place about exactly a year and 5 days before Epstein allegedly himself. Ryan says, attached in this doc you requested, it's the use of funds spreadsheet for the designer baby and human cloning company. Interesting. This gets us out of the self-funded garage phase to the first live birth of a human designer baby and possibly a human clone within 5 years. Ooh. Man, Yeah, these people are nuts. When I think of garage biology, I'm thinking maybe you're like breeding shrimp in your garage to get that elusive purple color that people are so after. But no, they're thinking about designer babies, which is one thing, and then human cloning, which is a completely other thing. In 5 years, that's pretty ambitious. Brian is mentioning how much he thinks it's going to cost to get the lab up and running. Here's the document number. I mean, garage biology will get you there. I don't think that terminology was used anywhere else within the 3 million plus some documents. Gives them about a year or so from this point on out. It looks like they're just mostly in the discussion phase. Brian is asking to hop on another call with Epstein. But the most important thing we really learn here is another keyword to search, which is Brian Bishop. And look for Brian. That's not how it's spelled. Brian Bishop. Alright, we got 66 documents to work with. So next up, we got an email showing a meeting between, or a scheduled meeting between Brian and Jeff. And it looks like this was scheduled prior to the last email we saw about 2 weeks ago, titled Designer Babies Agenda. Designer Babies, Structuring Finance, Privacy, Project Goals, Feasible Outcomes, and Timelines. Appearin, I looked it up, it's like another Zoom-esque platform. I think they switched to being called Whereby now. I don't know if it's because they showed up in the Epstein files, or maybe they had switched their name for a completely different reason. This is just so bizarre. Us normies out here are, using Zoom at work to meet with our colleagues to discuss, I don't know, how to get more customers for our service to increase revenue or sell more products. They're out here discussing how are we gonna successfully clone whole ass human beings and make designers super babies to the specifications that we want. Just a real quick side note to Austin Hill. I don't know who he is, but he seems to be kind of three-weighing between Jeff and Bishop, Brian Bishop, quite often here. So we'll have to look into him some other video, but this is them preparing for a video conference. Epstein is like, all right, on, waiting, I'm in the meeting. And Austin's like, we are on, you're not there. So this boomer, is he struggling with his video conferencing? I'm just imagining Epstein sitting and waiting in a Zoom call all alone.
Where are these guys?
Austin and Brian Bishop are in a separate call waiting for Epstein so that they can all talk about cloning human beings. For a guy as rich as Epstein, you would think he has like a dedicated tech guy following him around if he's having this much trouble operating video conferencing applications, but what do I know? And he does have a dedicated tech guy on his island named Jermaine. I found a separate document. I'll save that for another video. Alright, so here's an interesting data point. In this email, Epstein is reaching out to his buddy Vincenzo Lazo with Vince. We'll call him Vince. He's reaching out to his buddy Vince, and he's saying, Brian Bishop wants to talk to me. Do you know him? And this is about 2 weeks prior to them scheduling a appear-in meeting for their designer baby project. The reason I'm bringing this up is I was wondering if Jeffrey Epstein reached out to Brian Bishop or if Brian Bishop reached out to Jeffrey Epstein, and this kind of seems to answer the question because Epstein is saying, Brian Bishop wants to talk to me, do you know him? This suggests to me, like, I don't know who the fuck this guy is, but he reached out to me, like, do you know who he is? Should I bother talking to him? And his buddy Vince here responds, yeah, I do. He's a smart guy. Quirky, though. Yeah, he's really into freaking human cloning and designer babies and gene editing. So I would say quirky is a mild and somewhat accurate estimation of this guy. Does a mix of Bitcoin things and DNA data storage. And we'll get into Brian in a lot more detail later because I was able to find all of his social media and LinkedIn and everything, and he does seem to actually have started out as a Bitcoin guy, and professionally speaking, he's a computer fella, and cloning / gene editing and human modifications, etc. seems to just be a real passion project for Brian. That's the type of fella he is. He's really passionate about gene editing, designer babies, cloning, anything to do with that sort of deal. Here's another one. Let's see, from August 30th of 2018. The title reads, "More genetic editing continued." Brian is sending a slide deck that he made to Jeffrey Epstein regarding the designer baby project. I already checked the link. I checked Internet Archives. Unfortunately, this entire link has not been archived. It's currently a 404, not found on the website. However, this website still exists, and we are actually gonna go there and do a little deep dive after we're done going through some more of these files related to Brian Bishop. And boy, is there a wealth of information on that website. More specifically about how to find Brian Bishop on the internet to kind of see what he is about to this current day. And of course, I checked this link here, which no longer exists, or perhaps I don't have access, but that's not the error message I got. The error message I got suggests the use of funds, a Google spreadsheet, and it no longer exists. And I don't know, just the tone is so creepy. I mean, I would still be a little uncomfortable with the tone of this response if it was anyone other than Epstein, but keeping in mind that it's Epstein, it's even worse because, all right, we're going to implant the embryo and wait 9 months. Great ending. Bro, where are we implanting that embryo? Presumably in a human being and a woman. We'll just wait 9 months. Are you going to let your little research project just go out into the world, or is this poor woman gonna have to be a prisoner of yours in a tunnel under Little St. James or Great St. James somewhere in a little research lab that you got going on while we wait 9 months for a great ending? Real freak. Alright, here's another good one where Brian is sending Epstein the designer babies deck PDF that we can't access, unfortunately. And he says, "I've talked to Austin again. We have a series of questions, blah, 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 ground rules, blah, blah, blah. Most of these questions are around your requirements for secrecy and privacy, specifically regarding reputational risk and also any financial involvement." And I'm wondering, it's 2018. At this point, it might not be well known to the public, the name Jeffrey Epstein, but anyone that knows Jeffrey Epstein should already be familiar with the fact that he is a sexual predator. At this point, he had already been arrested and he certainly had not been held accountable, but it was on his record. So is this reputational risk Epstein thinking that, oh, designer babies are a little taboo. I don't want to sully my good name by being associated with funding a designer baby project? Or are they trying to protect the reputation of the designer baby project by hiding Epstein's association with it? I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments. Another good one here. Let's see. Brian says, "I think that one way this could be done is under the banner of my designer babies project, since the other deliverable is similar and shares so many of the same procedures and lab requirements." Okay, Brian, what's the other deliverable? I'm really curious because we do have a lot more emails about designer babies than we do explicitly about the cloning portion of this. So just wondering, what are the other deliverables? Is it human cloning, perhaps? I mean, I'm just wondering. Oops, I'm sorry, I was blocking that. So here's that line I was talking about regarding the other deliverables. As it was mentioned previously, so Brian is a crypto Bitcoin blockchain guy, right? He actually works at LedgerX. And if you guys are not familiar, LedgerX is a cryptocurrencies and digital assets clearinghouse, an exchange of sorts. So that's where Brian worked at the time for a couple of years, and we'll see that later more in detail in his LinkedIn. But it looks like at a certain point, Jeff and Brian's relationship isn't just about the gene editing and the cloning and designer babies. Now they're talking about cryptocurrencies and bitcoins. I'm not going to pull up all the files because I don't want this video to run too long either. But if you're interested, there's another guy named, let's see if I can find it, Jeremy Rubin. If you're looking more specifically about Epstein's involvement with Bitcoin and regulations around Bitcoin, Jeremy Rubin's another good name to search. He comes up quite a bit. And he talks about Ledger X and investments in it with Jeffrey Epstein. There's some emails where they're talking about, the government might regulate Bitcoin. Is that good? Is that bad? Do we want that? Do we not want that? How do we convince people? Should we write a letter? And I guess Brian is deeply involved in the Bitcoin development group, so he's going to go to his buddies there and try to convince them. Of course, as far as I can tell, the rest of the Bitcoin development group doesn't know that Jeffrey Epstein is in these communications, right? So Brian is just kind of mediating that without making it clear where this is really coming from. And this is a little preview, little window into like the financial games that Jeffrey Epstein is playing. At this point, we know that he's not just a blackmail operation, right? He has his fingers in a lot of different pots, including a lot of money laundering, possible arms trafficking. So I'm not surprised that he would be interested in Bitcoin and whether the government should be regulating it or not. Yes, there's one more interesting point to mention here. So Jeremy, when he is talking about getting a Series B investment into Ledger X and just kind of that discussion around it with Epstein, he says, also, to discuss an elephant in the room, how would investment get to them? Some people don't like certain associations, deservedly or not. Is your name good with the CFTC? And Epstein replies, yes, all financial institutions are easy, but I have no problem putting it in your name to help begin a reputation building. And it's just where he must have been in our financial system for him to so confidently be like, yeah, I know I got arrested for, children, but don't worry about it. All financial institutions are easy. I do find it interesting, not really at all surprising, but like worth mentioning how here Jeremy says, in regards to the funding, how it's done, I'm indifferent, biased to having it in your name, as it seems odd for me to come across that money unless we were to form some fund that I'm running that you invested in, for example, which seems more plausible. So it almost feels a little bit like, how do we make this look more legitimate, right? Like, it would be a little odd for me to just come across like millions of dollars, right? So we gotta legitimize this. We gotta form a fund and you invest in it, but maybe it'll be in my name, and that'll seem more, literally, that will seem more plausible. And then he goes on to say, Jeremy, oh boy, goes on to say, I guess I would be more so at their preference, but I think they would be worried about the same issue I raised. And he is talking about, oh yeah, the elephant in the room, the association, like your name and standing, Epstein. And it's just interesting to me how, like, they're not worried about doing business with a sicko, right? They're worried about just the perception of the public image of having done business with a sicko. Like, I'll make the deal with the devil as long as other people don't know that I made the deal with the devil. That's what it comes down to. Let's go back into the genetic modification, cloning, designer baby, all that good stuff. Here's a thread from October of 2018. So this is a couple months after they had that initial designer baby project planning meeting on zoomesqueappear.in. And so Brian is saying, I was in Tokyo last week. I spoke to a handful of investors. Here I'm assuming he's talking about investors in relation to funding their designer baby slash cloning project, human cloning project. He's talking about some information he gathered, and he's attaching some references to in vitro, gametogenesis. So if I remember my biology, genesis is like making, creating, and gameto, I'm guessing that means gametes, so creating gametes, in a cell instead of like within a human body. And he does go on to clarify that a bit more, producing sperm egg cells from other tissue but in a cell in vitro. And he continues to say, eventually this will mean we can make practically unlimited modification to the cells before generating an embryo. This isn't a requirement for our initial work, but it's a very important direction that will unlock more commercial opportunities. Yes, of course, because while Brian, this is a passion project for Brian. He is also, I guess, opportunistic, and he's thinking about the commercial, like, money-making scheme behind it, like, he's a proper American. You can take the American out of the capitalism, but you cannot take the capitalism out of the American. At every turn, even in this passion project, he's like, how can I make money out of this? Jeff responds, we need to get a read on legal first. Can't do anything where US rules apply to US citizens, regardless of where. It's such a great subject. What type of investors? So it looks like Brian has piqued Epstein's interest here. And it is kind of interesting for him to be like, yeah, let's check on the rules. I've been caught doing some things I shouldn't have been doing before. We can't do anything to US citizens, regardless of where? Question mark. I think it is also like a little creepy for it to be like, we're doing something to US citizens. Are these willing subjects, or are you like kidnapping people and holding them in your underground labs and tunnels, I'm assuming? I don't know, maybe on your island somewhere. Who knows with this guy. Man, these people really make me sick to like a guttural level, because really they're trying to play God. They are playing God. These embryos and human cloning subjects, like if they're successful, they're potentially creating other human beings with no care for the potential people they're creating beyond just progress for the sake of progress, and we gotta do it in the name of science. And yeah, I mean, they're playing God. They are not God, and it's gross. Alright, so now Brian is continuing. Legality. We can do research and development in the US, but yes, I will need to do careful analysis about medical tourism and other options. Medical tourism, so maybe they are aiming more towards like maybe couples who want to have like super babies or something, at least the legitimate-ish part of their project, so the non-cloning portion of it. I'm not sure. Ultimately, maybe do partnerships with overseas clinics and get commission on referring to customers. We can just sell the additive DNA to those overseas clinics. Many ways to structure. In the US, self-experimentation is not explicitly banned. US animal testing is open. Well, I'm not surprised about the self-experimentation part. I did take a look at his website. Basically runs like a little Wikipedia, but for human plus enhancements, gene editing, garage biology, do-it-yourself gene editing. I wonder if he's self-experimenting on himself or just like encouraging other people to do it and then recording the results. We're going to take a look at his website and you guys will see what I mean shortly. And yet another email discussing their designer baby project. Brian saying, oh great, sounds like you might be the first investor. And he goes on to say, like there's some taboo in the public about designer babies and people don't want to be associated with it. And also we want to make sure like the baby's privacy is kept hidden. And then he goes on to say, so I had always assumed the investor would need absolute anonymity for these kinds of products, so the financial structure needs to be designed with these details in mind. Thought it was funny that Epstein's like, I can't program, but I'm not bad at structuring. Smiley face. I've really only seen him use smiley face on very rare occasions. There's another one that's pretty good that maybe I'll make a separate video on, in a communication he's having with Ehud Barak. But yeah, so he's basically saying, yeah, don't worry about the financial stuff. I know how to launder money and keep like ownership of businesses private. Alright, I'm gonna speed run through the last 6 emails. Brian here is sending some articles to Epstein regarding the Chinese methodology for gene editing and designer babies. And he's talking about how high mosaicism seems to be a problem. And here he is sharing a link from his personal passion project website, DIY Human Plus, regarding presentation at a Hong Kong summit in 2018 on the topic of human genome editing, of course. Another email where he's referencing a document from his website regarding human germline. Here's reference. Alright, and here's probably my favorite email. Brian's response to Jeff from the time Jeff was saying, I like implant embryo, wait 9 months, great ending, right? So Brian is saying, proceeding with more mouse testing at my Ukraine lab. Huh? What Ukraine lab, dog? Surgeries, micro injections. I mean, this is like pretty shortly after they had their designer baby Zoom-esque appear.in meeting. So I can't imagine that Jeff's hooked him up with a lab in Ukraine that quickly. I mean, maybe he did. Maybe he had a lab ready to go and he was like, here you go, fly out there. It's your lab now. But yeah, so here we're finding out that I guess Brian has a lab in Ukraine. Or maybe he's just flexing. He's just like lying to Epstein to impress him and be like, yeah, I got a lab. I'm totally working on this stuff, so you should fund me some more. Maybe he's scamming the sicko. Who knows? It says, amateur in Mississippi has been testing human sperm modification. Just fluorescent tagging so far doesn't work for my purposes yet. This weekend I'm heading to a San Francisco garage biohacking conference. Jesus Christ, there's enough people on the planet doing this that they're having conferences, guys. They are out here having conferences. I mean, I guess as long as they're only testing it on themselves, like you do you. But yeah, so my Ukraine lab, interesting note there. Now, I think with that, we pretty much covered all the relevant emails between Brian Bishop and Epstein. There's a lot more talking going on, but I did want to kind of just lay the foundation of where they are at, familiarize ourselves with like what their relationship was. Before digging into Brian, I do want to say, I did read all the emails that I could find that he comes up in. I don't think he was at all interested or involved in the inappropriate relations with minors part of Epstein's operations / passion. It seems to me like Brian is a Bitcoin / tech nerd whose true passion is garage biohacking and biology and human modification and enhancements, etc. So I don't think that he was kids on the island. Could I be wrong? Certainly, but I really don't personally think that's what he was up to. It seems like his relationship with Epstein is really limited to Bitcoin and designer babies and human cloning. But I will add, there were some files referencing a victim discussing what sounded like having given birth and the baby being taken away from her. I just realized that I made the assertion about babies being birthed by Epstein's victims, possibly on Epstein's properties, but I didn't provide the files, so here's the particular file where I got that information from. This seems to be like a journal of the girl who has given birth to not once, but 2 children under the care of Ghislaine Maxwell and possibly on a Jeffrey Epstein property. The format is such that she has handwritten journal notes, and as far as I can tell, she kind of coded them going down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, all the way across. So close your eyes, and then someone at the FBI, presumably, whoever was working on these files, kind of translated them for us. The reason I feel fairly confident that there were babies being birthed by victims on either the island or some of his other estates or somewhere in relation to Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein is because if you read this victim's diary, when she says, Ghislaine said, push all the pain away. I don't understand. Blood and water all over the bed. She was right. Like a feeling when your tummy hurts and you had to push. She said, close my eyes, and put her hands over my eyes, but I didn't close them because of the tiny cries. I am so lost. I saw between her fingers this tiny head and body in the doctor's hands. It reached its tiny arms and had a tiny foot. I would argue the tiny cries and the tiny head and body appearing in the doctor's hands and blood and water over the bed and the excruciating pain of it all, that kind of sounds like someone giving birth. But if you're still not convinced, yeah, we can just go down a little more. Here the victim goes on to say, a couple pages down, in the hall, Ghislaine said she was beautiful. She was, not is, she was a beautiful girl. I heard her. Where is she? Why did she stop whimpering? She was born. I heard the tiny cries. I can't do this anymore. So whimpering, beautiful girl. She was born. Again, sounds like the victim gave birth to a beautiful little baby girl, and perhaps either the baby did not make it or they took the baby away and they just told her that the baby didn't make it. And if that wasn't enough, if you're still not convinced babies were being born through the victims, you can read the rest of the journal. There is some more details into the psyche of Epstein and Maxwell's victims here. Definitely not pleasant stuff. She was so very beautiful. She was perfect. I can't bring myself to write what happened. I am beyond broken. I only got 10 to 15 minutes to hold and feed her before they took her. She's mine. I want her back. There's an ultrasound poem with the title Child. And if you still weren't convinced, she says later on, when we arrived at Palm Beach, I was taken to a house close to Jeffrey's, I think called Ocean Boulevard or Street. But it was close and I was alone except for a driver, not Mr. Juan, an elderly French lady whose picture on the wall didn't have her. She had a thick accent and was kind. Said she had been born to deliver babies and had been doing so before I was born. A shot and hook. Hard to read with that F over the screen. But too much blood with so much water and unbearable pain. She put her hands inside of me and seemed worried. I didn't understand. Something about the baby facing the wrong way and putting pressure on a placenta. So there you have it. I think that's all the proof I need to provide that there was at least one victim giving birth to children under the care is like not the right choice of word, under the supervision within the premises of Epstein's estate, Epstein's people. Right, so there is a small part of me, maybe not so small, there is a part of me that is wondering, yeah, maybe he wasn't like diddling people on the island, but was he part of any of that? Were the babies birthed by the victims of Epstein pipelined into this research? I do kind of have to wonder that. That's all speculation, obviously. We don't really have any files that's connecting those two together, but it seems like there were, unfortunately, some births given in the Epstein residencies, let's say operational locations. So it is a dark thought to think about what happened to those babies. Just going through the raw emails took 35-ish minutes, so I'm gonna split this and make this a two-parter. First part being the emails we just reviewed, and shortly after I will drop a part 2 where we go into Brian Bishop specifically, his social media, his DIY passion project cloning website. If you like to dig and explore through the public catacombs we call the internet, please subscribe and I'll see you on the next one. If you thought the video sucked, or if you can think of ways I could improve, put it in the comments. If you liked the video, I would also like to hear back. But thanks, guys.